Do have a heavy to extreme cell at your 1 to 2 o'clock.
The reports the pilot of the plane may have been doing aerial acrobatics just before the...
By no stretch of the imagination are we healed, and we may never be healed.
It's the afternoon of February 29, 2012. A sunny, breezy day in Melbourne, Florida, on the state's Atlantic coast. At the local Class D airport, the parallel east-west runways are buzzing with a steady stream of private and commercial traffic. Shortly before 5 p.m., November 544 Sierra Romeo, a Cirrus SR-22 based on the field, is a few miles south of the airport, inbound for landing. Its pilot, the owner of a local theater multiplex, is accompanied by 2 young employees. With a little over 500 hours total time, 300 of it in the SR-22, the instrument-rated private pilot stays reasonably active, flying about 75 hours a year. It's 4:58 p.m. when the pilot makes his initial call to Melbourne Tower over radiation, a visual checkpoint 5 miles south of the field. His is one of several aircraft operating near the airport.
Melbourne Tower, Cirrus 540 Romeo, over radiation inbound for both stops.
40 Romeo, Melbourne. Zero radiation?
Just past radiation, westbound 1,000 feet.
40 Romeo, speak to and report a right mid still downwind for only 9 and right.
Right mid still downwind for 9 right, 40 Romeo.
The controller then mentions he'll try to sequence the aircraft for runway 9 left if possible, presumably since the general aviation ramp is on the north side of the airport.
I'll get you 9 left if I can. I'm a little busy right now.
All right, fine, 40 Romeo.
Just over a minute after that first exchange, with the Cirrus 2 miles out on a heading roughly appropriate for a midfield downwind pattern entry, the controller calls back.
40 Romeo, I'm just going to have to land you on 9 right there with a taxi back to the ramp, or else I'm going to have to extend you for about 6 miles to follow assessment.
9 right's fine, and if I can get a long landing, I'm going to Barra. That'd be great, 40 Romeo.
With the news that the pilot is headed for Bayer Air, which is on the east end of the airport and actually closer to 9 right given a long landing, the controller seems glad that the matter of runway selection has been resolved.
Oh, fair, that's better. Okay, then 40 Alpha, 40 Romeo, the long landing's approved, runway 9 right, and third land.
Clear to land on 9 right, 40 Romeo.
In the cockpit, the pilot turns left, positioning the aircraft to enter the pattern on a tight right base, rather than the midfield downwind specified earlier. Just as he's coming even with the approach end of the runway, however, there's a startling transmission from the tower.
40 Romeo, do you have the Cirrus there? He's about a mile final for 9 right.
Unbeknownst to the pilot, another Cirrus, this one flown by an instructor and student, has been on a straight-in approach to 9 right the whole time.
I'm on a real short base for 9 right to land now, 40 Romeo.
40 Romeo, no, so I needed you to extend the follow the Cirrus out there at mile final.
Taken out of context, the first few interactions between 4 Sierra Romeo and Melbourne Tower seem relatively normal. In light of the actual situation that day, however, there were dangerous errors. Most notably, the controller's failure to mention the aircraft on final, or the fact that he expected 4 Sierra Romeo to land behind it. Why the mistakes? There's some indication that the controller's focus on a matter of secondary importance, 4 Sierra Romeo's destination on the airport, played a role. From the beginning, it was clear he assumed the pilot would prefer to land on runway 9 left, the GA side of the airport. This was a reasonable assumption, but for some reason it persisted after the pilot clearly stated that 9 right was acceptable. When the pilot finally mentioned his actual destination, the controller seemed primarily relieved that he could stop worrying about the runway issue. The rest of the exchange, which included the clearance to land, seemed hurried, almost an afterthought.
40 Romeo, the long landing's approved, runway 9 right, and third land.
Later, the controller would state that he felt it unnecessary to specify a landing sequence, because aircraft like 4 Sierra Romeo typically turned base a mile or more from the end of the runway, and because he hadn't cleared it for a short approach. shaky assumptions at best. Was the controller feeling overloaded? Only 2 controllers were on duty that afternoon, one handling tower and one handling ground. But according to later statements, the staffing level was not unusual, and the traffic that afternoon, while brisk, was not particularly heavy. The pilot's actions also deserve scrutiny. Although the clearance to land technically superseded the tower's earlier instructions to fly a downwind to base entry, at a busy airport it was arguably unwise to interpret the clearance as permission to proceed directly to a tight base leg. Given the vagaries of the situation, a call for clarification would have been entirely appropriate. In addition, despite the controller's failure to point it out, the pilot could have been aware of the traffic on final. The other aircraft was cleared to land on runway 9 right well after 4 Sierra Romeo started listening to tower frequency. And as every primary student learns, it's a good practice to visually clear final approach, tower or no tower. Finally, it's worth noting that Melbourne was the pilot's home airport. There's no way to be sure, but given the issues just discussed, it seems likely that a degree of complacency had set in. Familiarity breeds contempt, a dangerous thing around airplanes.
Fort Sierra Romeo, do you have the Spirit there? He's about a mile final for 9 right.
I'm on a real short base for 9 right to land now, Fort Sierra Romeo.
Fort Sierra Romeo, no, so I needed you to extend the power of the Spirit out there at mile final. Cut it in tight now, cut it in tight to 9 right.
The pilot, clearly surprised, reacts immediately to the urgent instruction. He throws the aircraft into a sharp left bank, while simultaneously increasing power from 1500 to 2000 RPM and raising the nose. Witnesses watch helplessly as the events of the next few seconds unfold. The aircraft, now headed due west, rolls inverted before pitching down and entering a spin. Its altitude is roughly 300 AGL. The Cirrus's ballistic parachute deploys, but it's too late to slow the descent, and the aircraft hits the ground in a vertical dive, coming to rest in a crater 4 feet deep.
All right, 4 6, 1 Delta Alpha, go around straight ahead.
Going around 1 Delta Alpha. Tower, did you see that?
I did.
At the time of the accident, the aircraft was calculated to be only 31 pounds below max gross weight. Prior to the final maneuver sequence, it was flying at an airspeed of roughly 100 knots. Telemetry data recovered from avionics confirmed eyewitness reports. By aggressively banking left while raising the nose and increasing power, in other words, by raising the angle of attack while bringing strong left-hand turning tendencies into play, the pilot put the aircraft in a classic pre-spin situation. With its stall speed already on the high side of normal because of the high gross weight, and perhaps as much as 50% higher than that due to the increased wing loading caused by the abrupt maneuver, there was no margin for error. But if the causes of the spin are straightforward, the other circumstances are less so. Why did the pilot respond so aggressively? And why did he turn left rather than right? As one witness, the captain of a Delta Airlines flight waiting to depart runway 9 right put it, "I was astonished at such a hot dog maneuver anywhere outside of an air show, as he was very low and must have been at least 60 degrees of bank. It just made no sense for him to be turning that aggressively and in the opposite direction of traffic."
Sierra Romeo, no, so I needed you to extend the power of the Cirrus out there at mile final. Cut it in tight now, cut it in tight to 9 right.
We'll never know for certain, but perhaps, based on the urgency in the controller's voice, the pilot imagined the traffic to be so close that a left turn would have taken him more quickly away from danger. In the moment, for example, he may have thought he was overtaking the other aircraft from above and behind. It's also possible, given the controller's statement about extending downwind to follow the other aircraft, that the pilot was attempting to fix the situation by turning outbound, trying to get back to the downwind leg so that the other aircraft could land first. Whatever the case, There's one indisputable fact. The actual positions of the aircraft did not merit a panic response. The aircraft on final was a mile away and 300 feet below the accident aircraft when the tower first mentioned its presence, and still a half-mile away, with the traffic in sight at the time of the fatal spin. Given that, it's interesting to contemplate alternatives. Rather than giving hurried, confusing instructions to 4 Sierra Romeo, the controller could simply have told the other aircraft to go around. Arguments about who was wrong and who should have done what could have waited until both aircraft were safely on the ground. The crash of November 544 Sierra Romeo is a startling example of how a series of miscommunications, unfounded assumptions, and snap judgments can combine to disastrous effect, even in an apparently benign situation. At towered fields, we expect ATC to keep track of the big picture and make sure things flow smoothly. But as pilots, we also have responsibilities. It's not enough to sit in our little cocoons, do as we're told, and speak when spoken to. Staying vigilant, building a mental picture of the traffic situation, keeping an eye out for potential misunderstandings, speaking up if instructions are unclear, these are the things that keep us safe. And they're equally important whether it's our first landing in an airport or our 500th. It's also important to remember who's ultimately in charge. We refer to ATC specialists as controllers, but in truth, a more apt term would probably be coordinators or perhaps directors. Because, as important as their role is, controllers don't really control aircraft. Pilots do. That being said, on a day-to-day operational basis, it's ATC that has the authority. And while there are times when it's clearly necessary for pilots to speak up, we have to be careful not to overuse our veto power, as it were. The appropriate balance is perhaps best summed up by the old saying, trust but verify. Of course, that's all for naught if we fail to control the aircraft. Short of a bona fide imminent mid-air collision, nothing justifies the kind of abrupt, low-altitude, low airspeed maneuvering that led to 4 Sierra Romeo's demise. This accident holds important lessons about communication, low-altitude maneuvering, and traffic pattern operations. But perhaps its most critical lesson has to do with our fundamental responsibilities as pilots. When all's said and done, we don't answer to ATC. We answer to ourselves and to the passengers who entrust their lives to us.